Okay, I want you to picture something for a second. You're watching one of those, those amazing high-definition nature documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
The camera pans across the savannah, and you see a foal, a baby horse being born. It hits the ground, it's a bit messy, shakes itself off. And then what happens?
Well, within minutes, usually it's trying to stand up.
Exactly, it's standing. And within, what, an hour?
An hour tops. It's walking.
By the afternoon, it is literally running with the herd. It's remarkably capable, ready to go. Now, cut to a human delivery room.
Oh, that is a very, very different scene.
Right. You have a human infant, and let's be honest, as much as we love them, biologically speaking, they're kind of useless.
They really are. I mean, they are physiologically incompetent compared to almost any other mammal out there.
They can't hold their own heads up. They can't regulate their own body temperature. They are certainly not running anywhere.
No. They're completely 100% dependent on someone else just to survive for months, even years.
So this is the core question we're tackling on this deep dive. Why?
Why did human evolution, which is usually so ruthlessly efficient, take such a massive apparent step backward when it comes to our babies?
It feels like a massive flaw, doesn't it? We're the dominant species, and yet we produce the most vulnerable offspring.
It feels like a flaw, but as the research we've pulled for today shows, it's actually a feature. It's a strategic trade-off.
A trade-off that, unlocked our greatest superpowers.
Nice.
I love that framing. So today we are unpacking this whole evolutionary mystery of human birth. We've got a great stack of research here. We're going to look at the classic textbook explanation, which is all about bone.
The obstetric dilemma.
Right. And then we're going to shake that up with a newer, really compelling theory called the EGG hypothesis, which sounds like breakfast, but is actually about
Metabolism.
And finally, we'll see how being born too early is the specific reason we have culture and language and, well, everything.
It's a fantastic story.
It's a wild ride. Let's start with the classic view. If you took a biology class in, say, the last 50 years, you probably heard about the obstetric dilemma. So break it down for us. What is the dilemma?
So, for decades, this was the narrative. It frames the problem as a conflict between two major evolutionary trends happening at the same time in our ancestors.
Okay.
On one side, you have encephalization.
Which is just the fancy way of saying our brains got huge.
Precisely. The genus Homo started evolving these massive brains, and so, of course, these large skulls to hold them, we were getting smarter.
And at the exact same time?
At the exact same time, we were evolving bipedalism. We stood up and started walking on two legs.
And that changed our whole architecture.
Drastically. To walk upright efficiently, without waddling around, our pelvises had to change shape. They became narrower and more twisted than our ape ancestors.
Okay, so I see the train wreck coming. You have a passenger, the head getting bigger, and you have the exit door, the pelvis getting smaller.
That is the squeeze. That is the dilemma. You have these big-brained babies trying to pass through a pelvis that's been reshaped for walking.
And the source material points out this really specific detail, that it's not just narrow, it has a twisted geometry.
Yes, that's so important. It's not just a uniform tube like another ape's. It is effectively an obstacle course.
How so?
The inlet, so the top part where the baby's head enters the pelvis, is widest from side to side. But the outlet, the bottom where the baby exits, is widest from front to back.
So the baby can't just slide out.
No, it has to actively rotate.
It has to do a turn.
A whole series of turns. They're called the cardinal movements of labor. The infant has to rotate its head and then its shoulders to fit through those changing dimensions.
And that's why human birth is so long and painful and dangerous compared to other animals?
It is. A chimpanzee birth is usually much more straightforward. The baby's head just goes straight through. For humans, it's a biomechanical tightrope walk.
So the classic theory says the head is big, the hips are narrow, it's a tight fit, so evolution had to find some kind of workaround.
And that workaround was timing.
You just get him out earlier.
You get them out earlier. To prevent the head from getting physically too large to ever pass through, natural selection favored birth happening early.
We're basically evicted before we're fully cooked.
In a sense, yes. And the comparative data on this is, it's really striking. At birth, a human brain is only about 25 to 30% of its adult volume.
Only 25%. And for a chimp.
A chimpanzee is born with a brain that's already about 40% of its adult size.
That is a huge difference.
It is. And if humans stayed in the womb until our brains reached that same 40% maturity,
it just wouldn't fit.
It would be physically impossible. The head would be too big. The species would have died out.
So the obstetric dilemma creates a hard stop. You have to be born now or you're never getting out.
That's the classic argument. Hips versus head. Case closed. Yeah.
And for a long time, that was it. But science is never that simple, right? Researchers have started poking holes in this idea.
They have. Because there's a huge question that the obstetric dilemma doesn't quite answer. Why didn't we just evolve wider hips?
Right. I mean, sure, maybe wider hips make us walk a little less efficiently. Maybe we're not as fast. But wouldn't that be better than the, historically high mortality rate of childbirth?
Exactly that puzzle. Evolution is usually really good at solving those kinds of mortality problems.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the EGG hypothesis.
This is the part that really fascinated me because it shifts the focus completely away from bones and...
Towards energy.
Right. Tell us about EGU.
So this is largely based on a 2012 study. EGG stands for the energetics of gestation and growth.
Okay, so break this down. What does energetics have to do with when a baby is born?
Well, the hypothesis suggests that the real constraint on pregnancy length isn't just the size of the hole in the pelvis. It's the metabolic limit of the mother.
She just runs out of fuel.
Basically, yeah. Pregnancy is incredibly expensive energetically. You're growing another person from scratch.
Of course.
By the end of pregnancy, the data shows a woman's total energy expenditure hits about twice her basal metabolic rate.
2 times the basal rate? What does that feel like? Is that like running a marathon every day?
It's a massive physiological load to sustain 24/7. Sustaining anything over about 2.1 times your basal metabolic rate is pretty much the ceiling for what humans can do long-term.
That's the red line.
That's the red line. So the EGG hypothesis says birth happens not because the head hits the pelvic wall, but because the fetus's energy demands cross a metabolic threshold.
A metabolic crossover point.
Exactly. The fetus is growing exponentially, and it gets to a point where its demand for calories and oxygen exceeds what the mother can physically process and transfer through the placenta.
The baby is eating the mom out of house and home, energetically speaking.
That is a great way to put it. The mother's metabolism basically says, I cannot give you any more than this. So labor is triggered. It's an eviction notice based on fuel supply.
That reframes everything. It's not just a mechanical problem, it's a thermodynamic one.
And it suggests the dilemma isn't one thing. It's a system-wide constraint. Evolution is balancing 3 spinning plates: the hips, the head, and the maternal energy supply.
And there was another study mentioned in our stack, I think from 2015, that also threw a wrench into the pure hips argument, right?
Yes, that was crucial. For a long time, the assumption was wider hips equal bad mechanics for walking.
We waddle.
Right. But this analysis suggested that actually wider pelvises don't reduce walking efficiency as much as we thought.
Which implies that if hips could have gotten wider without a huge penalty, then narrow hips aren't the only reason babies are born early.
Precisely. If the hips aren't the absolute hard limit, then the metabolic limit must be the real ceiling.
So whether it's the hips or the metabolism, the result is the same. We are born early, we are born helpless.
We are born as what biologists call secondarily altricial.
Okay, we need to define that because it sounds like a sci-fi insult. You look a little secondarily altricial today.
It does sound like that, but it's a key concept. In biology, you generally have 2 types of newborns. You have precocial species.
Like the foal from the intro?
Right. Born mature, eyes open, walking, ready to go. Then you have altricial species. Think of like songbirds or kittens. Born naked, blind, totally dependent.
And humans, we're primates. We should be precocial.
Exactly. Most primates are pretty capable at birth. A baby chimp can cling to its mother's fur right away. It has grip strength. But humans have evolved to be much, much closer to the altricial side of that spectrum.
So we're primates who evolved backwards into being helpless.
In a way, yeah. That's the secondary part of the name. We came from more precocial ancestors, but evolved back toward an altricial state.
But here's the twist, and I think this is the most important part of this whole deep dive. This underdevelopment isn't a flaw. It's actually a massive strategic advantage.
It is the absolute key to our success. Because we are born early, a huge chunk of our brain growth happens outside the womb.
Postnatally.
Yes. People talk about the 4th trimester. The first year of human life is just explosive neural development. Synaptogenesis, the connections between neurons, is happening at an incredible rate.
But why is it better to do that outside than inside? Why not just stay in the oven longer?
Because of the environment. Think about it. If your brain developed fully inside the womb, it would be developing in the dark, in isolation. It would be hardwired based on a genetic blueprint with 0 input from the outside world.
It's a closed system.
Right. But because so much of our brain growth happens after we're born, Our brains are literally shaped by the rich social environment we're born into.
That makes so much sense. It gives us developmental flexibility. We aren't just downloading a preset operating system, we're building the software as we interact with the world.
Exactly that. Our neural circuits are being sculpted by the specific sights, sounds, and language around us. It's why humans can adapt to almost any environment on Earth.
A baby born in the Arctic and a baby born in the Amazon have the same basic hardware.
But they can wire themselves perfectly for their own survival needs.
So the helplessness buys us adaptability. That's the trade-off.
That's the trade-off. If we were born fully cooked, we'd be rigid. By being born raw, we are malleable.
But that comes at a really steep cost. Someone has to take care of this helpless little blob for a long, long time.
And that cost is what drove the evolution of our entire social structure. This is where the biology turns into sociology.
This connects to the it takes a village idea, right?
Absolutely. The thinking is that because human infants are so incredibly dependent, mothers could rarely, if ever, raise them alone. It just wasn't feasible.
Yeah, if you have a baby that can't move and needs constant feeding for a year, plus maybe a toddler, you need backup. You can't hunt and gather and hold a baby 24/7.
Exactly. This led to what we call cooperative breeding. Care provided by fathers, grandparents, older siblings, the whole group. Biologists call them alloparents.
I like that. But chimps don't really do that, right?
Not in the same way. Chimp mothers are very possessive of their infants. They don't just hand them off. But human mothers had to.
So our biological helplessness actually forced us to become social.
It's selected for connection. Think about it. Evolution would have favored individuals who could form strong social bonds, who could read faces and intentions. If we were born like foals, able to run away, we might not have needed to develop such complex social webs.
That's profound. Our vulnerability is the glue that holds our species together.
And it creates this extremely long learning window. Our childhoods are so much longer than other primates that prolonged dependency isn't just waiting to grow up. It's a dedicated period for learning.
This is when we download the culture.
Language, tool use, social norms, complex rituals, all of this takes a long time to absorb. If we were born finished, we wouldn't have that malleable period to absorb the collective knowledge of our tribe.
It's so interesting. We think of survival of the fittest as being strong and independent. But for humans, survival of the fittest meant being dependent enough to need a tribe, which in turn made the tribe stronger.
That is the beautiful paradox.
Right.
Our physical weakness at birth necessitated our social strength. We are the most social animal because we're the most helpless animal at birth.
So let's just bring this all together, because there are a lot of layers. We start with the squeeze.
Right. Big brains, bipedal hips, constraint number one.
Then we add the metabolic ceiling. Mom just runs out of energy to grow the baby any further inside.
Constraint number two, the fuel gauge hits empty.
And these two things force the baby out early, leaving it helpless, secondarily altricial.
Correct.
But that helplessness is what allows the brain to wire itself to the world and forces us to rely on each other, which creates society and culture.
You've got it. It is a perfect, elegant example of an evolutionary trade-off. We traded physical ability at birth for cognitive and social potential down the line.
It's the ultimate long game.
The ultimate long game. It shows how evolution works with intersecting constraints. It's not just one thing. It's anatomy, metabolism, and social structure, all pushing and pulling on each other.
It really changes how you look at a newborn. You see this fragile little thing that can't even lift its head, and you think, wow, fragile. But actually, that fragility is the very mechanism that allows it to become human.
That's right. The source material ends with a thought that I think just sums it up perfectly.
Oh, I know the one you mean. It gave me chills.
It points out that the same newborns that can't hold up their own heads, that can't eat or move,
these are the same beings that eventually develop symphonies and mathematics and spacecraft.
the helplessness is the price we pay for the potential of the human mind.
Exactly. If we were born ready to run, we might never have learned to fly.
That is a beautiful place to leave it.
Next time you see a baby, don't just see a helpless bundle. See a strategic evolutionary masterpiece. Thanks for diving in with us today.
Always a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive. Stay curious.